Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We have a very, very special guest today. Mike Glover from Fieldcraft Survival. You got a lot going on. Give us a quick, before we get into all this, give us a quick bio. Tell us about your military career and then what you're doing now as a civilian.
Yeah, military guy. Spent 20 years in the military government contracting. Did Green Beret stuff from 03 when I went to selection until 2016. Was an infantry guy for 4 years. Spent a lot of time in different positions, all kinds of different deployments. And then at the end of my career as a sergeant major, decided to start contracting. So I separated from active service and started contracting with the Central Intelligence Agency, and then hung it all up in 2016 to start my business, Fieldcraft Survival.
And tell me what Fieldcraft Survival is, what your goal is behind this.
Yeah, the mission is simple. It's to prepare citizens for the worst case scenario, whether it's man-made or natural. It's to prepare citizens across the full spectrum of this idea called preparedness.
So teach a man to fish, right?
Absolutely. We train the trainer is what we say. We don't treat our students or clients as subordinates like they're in Ranger Battalion. We treat them as they are instructors going out and teaching their families and their communities.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if one of the ways I like to think about it, because there's a lot of people that don't know where to start in their own preparedness. One of the ways I like to think about it is with guys like you and Tim Kennedy and others who contribute, Dutch Moyer and a bunch of people. If you protect someone, they're protected while you're there. If you teach them to protect themselves, then they can protect themselves and others as well, right? So it's like,
yeah,
it doesn't really matter. People get too hung up on, I guess, on the minutia of how we're going to get where we're going to go. You know what I mean? Like if it's going to be a man-made disaster or just a natural disaster or just bad luck or whatever, right? But the conditions are going to be the same, right? Like if it's, you're going to want to be able to find your way outside of major populated areas. You're going to want to understand how wind patterns work in case it's some kind of, chem bio situation. You're going to want to know how to find clean drinking water, build shelter, and find and prepare food in a way that's going to be sustainable, right? Those are kind of some of the core elements there.
Yeah, to paraphrase Travis Haley, it's like we're not teaching shooters, we're teaching people how to be thinkers.
Right.
And, the guys that you mentioned who I all served with, both Tim Kennedy and Dutch, I just talked to Dutch like right before this podcast, which is interesting. When you have guys with profound experiences, often like in the tactical space, which I don't consider myself a member of the tactical space because all the toxicity that it is, because we're teaching preparedness. We're teaching people how to think. We're not teaching technical proficiency in one specific niche genre. We're teaching people, hey, a survival disaster, whether it's, short duration, extreme stress, or long duration over time, is going to require you to think cognitively, make good decisions under stress. So just shooting on a flat range and hitting paper and steel is not a reflection of your capability. So we look at all disasters because it's an equal opportunist. It doesn't care what background you are, if you are a Delta Force operator or if you're bagging groceries at your local grocery store. It's going to treat you the same. So I think that's what preparedness is. It's a loose genre, a lot of shit.
Sure, yeah. I mean, disaster doesn't really look at your resume. It doesn't give a fuck who you are or where you've been. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You're either prepared for that shit or you're not.
Yep.
One of the principles that we have here at the show, and we've got this list of principles that I think are, kind of a roadmap for how to be a citizen. Now, it's my opinion, and I believe the facts support this opinion, that you're either going to be a citizen of a country or you're going to be a subject under rule of, other human beings. And the latter is something that Americans have found intolerable throughout history, right? We don't like that shit. And I bring this quote up a lot, but I think it's always salient. Plato said that I'm going to paraphrase because I don't want to keep using exact words, but Plato said that if you fail to get involved essentially in the running of your government, then you're doomed to be ruled by fools, right? And I think that's where we are now. Like a lot of people rightly point out how fucked up everything is, but very rarely do they look in the mirror and ask, how did I contribute to this? And it's not about placing blame. As somebody who's done quite a bit of medical training and triage and stuff like that, you know that identifying and addressing the problem is the important part, not necessarily like assigning blame is a fucking useless practice. There's no point in that. But knowing how you affected all of this will show you how to unaffect it, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, what you're saying is, this idea of putting band-aids on hatchet wounds, not addressing the problem, and allowing it by talking in echo chambers about it is just perpetuating the problem. It's spreading the cancer further instead of looking at probable courses of action or distilled solutions that are going to work in solving the overarching problem. I mean, a lot of people in this country who are talking about the collapse of our democracy or the sovereignty of our democracy talk a lot about it, but don't affect the literal change. Tim Kennedy, who started this school concept,
Apogee, yeah.
When I was with him, when I was his boss, when I was a sergeant major, and he was in my J3 shop, he had this as a concept, but he made a plan and executed on that plan. So I see, I just did a live feed yesterday where they were talking poorly about Tim Kennedy. I'm like, so you're hung up on a comment that's related to the Second Amendment, but you're not looking at the totality of the circumstance, including him changing lives and the future of our country by starting a school. Like, that's not important for you to talk about? Like, how about we amplify that so we could do more good and actually head in the right direction instead of getting hung up on these personas and all this toxicity, which people have literally made their identity. It's like, the more I talk about, the more I meme about, the more toxic shit I distill about, then that's going to make me feel better, and it's not going to do any good for the country.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is kind of an extreme example, but one of the parallels to me is the Uvalde situation, right? Where a lot of people get themselves into a position and they talk tough and they know what the problems are, but when it's time to act, they don't act. And you know as well as I do, aside from just repetition, like anybody, you can teach anybody to be a good shooter, in my opinion. I don't think, unless there's some,
Anybody.
unless they have some like severe physical disability, obviously that's a different thing. But to learn how to shoot and communicate is not rocket surgery, man. That's just repetition. That's really what it is. The difference between the people who can do it and the people who can't, the people who are extremely good at it and the people who are just okay at it, is the will to act. That's what it is. That's what we refer to as violence of action, right? That's kind of like how you're trying to get your mind in the right spot to do what's necessary, move the ball forward, whatever it happens to be. I get so, one of the reasons I started this show is because my old show, American Party, we did a lot, Dakota Meyer and I did a lot to, I guess, elucidate a lot of the problems that were going on in our country. But I felt like we kind of kept sliding into the same trap of just, if you're just sitting around, like imagine the house is on fire and you're just another dick standing on the street watching it burn. You know what I mean? You're not doing a goddamn thing out there. So that's why we pivoted to this show. And what I want to do here is let people know that, yeah, there's a lot of shit that's fucked up. A lot of it is our fault because of our ignorance and complacency. But the good news is nobody can stop you from being a better citizen. And you have to make that choice. You're either going to be a citizen or you're going to be a subject. Those are the only two options there. One of the principles that I wanted to talk to you about today is I'll do something every day to help my country, my countrymen, or all men. And it's kind of, it's based on excuse me, it's based on this idea of the social contract, right? So we talk about our rights a lot, what we're entitled to, but we don't talk about what our obligations are very much, unfortunately. And I kind of, the support, uh, the constitutional oath, right? I mean, it's support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. For our list of principles, I say support liberty, because I think this applies to everybody, and no matter what country they're in. But I don't like platitudes like support the troops and live, laugh, love, and all that horse shit. Right? That's meaningless to me. Like what actions associated that? But when I hear those empty gestures like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, I literally cringe at the vagueness and lack of commitment in that statement. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? So there is a gap in our ability to defend ourselves, to survive in austere environments and all this stuff. And we know that. There's a gap both in our knowledge to do that and in our readiness to do it, which I don't think are the same thing. A knowledge base is one thing. Knowing how to do something, as we said before, that's important. But having the will to act is something that seems to be lost, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of the creature comforts that we fell in love with this experiment of freedom and democracy and liberty, the American dream, has made us create a culture of outsourcing or being comfortable with outsourcing everything. We outsource our healthcare, we outsource our security, we outsource our education. And this social contract, as you described, is an agreement because we're going to collaborate. But it becomes less of a collaboration when the government is running on its own agendas based on whatever you want to, the many variables that create toxic governance. And then you have us who are left behind, the citizens who are left behind, who, because of the benefits of freedom, have become more complacent. So now we go, oh, you mean we actually have to take care of ourselves and be self-reliant because the supply chain is broken or fractured, because the police officer or the first responder won't show up because of politics? And one of the things that we educate is, the idea of even citizens, I love it because, we host responsible citizen classes for free every Wednesday using a subject matter expert. We've been doing that since the origin stories of this company, and teaching that if you are a player in this collaborative effort called being a citizen of America, you need to be an asset, because the contrast is you'll be the liability.
Right.
And, it's like the Second Amendment argument where it's like, it's because of the sports shooting, the Clay shooting, the USPSA. It has nothing to do with that, and everything to do with the fact that we are a superpower. I mean, Russia and Ukraine will demonstrate that. So if you are a citizen and you wake up every single day looking at yourself as an asset, then you have a selfless service mindset. Military, first responders, a lot of people who work in these specific jobs understand what that means in the culture. But it also means if you don't have that culture to relate to, that you could do something about it. That the technical skills you learn on a flat range are not for you. They are for your family. They are for your community. The medical skills that you learn, shame on you if you drive by an accident where you could respond and affect change in somebody who's fighting for their life. But we'll be pulling out our cell phones before pulling out our tourniquets because we want to catch it for the gram. So I think there's a cultural shift that needs to take place. And I'm glad, whether it's your podcast, whether it's our responsible citizen class, that the more we talk about this, the more we create a culture around this idea, then people who have not grown up in family units, not grown up in churches, not grown up in communities are getting more tethered to the idea of like, holy crap, man, this guy is not an enemy. He's a fellow citizen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This dude bleeding on the ground is a friend. Maybe I should help him.
Well, I mean, that's the story of the Good Samaritan, right? All the people that were friends walked right on fucking by. But the guy who should have been an enemy, this is something we talk about the Good Samaritan. People think it's just a random person who does something nice for somebody else. And it's a misunderstanding of what a historical Samaritan was, right? So these people were at odds with the Israelites. They were not friends. It wasn't necessarily Hatfield and McCoy's, but it was pretty contentious among these two groups of people. The story there is that it doesn't matter if somebody looks, thinks like you, or whatever the fuck, right? What matters is that they are a human being in the same tribe you are, and you are duty bound. I don't give a fuck about your feelings. You are duty bound to assist that person when they need your help, right? So if you ever in your life need help, and I promise you will, if you think that you're entitled to help from somebody else, that is only true if you've done the work and helped other people as well, right? Like that's what the contract is amongst human beings. To your point about, well, first of all, with the medical stuff, if you can't find one of Mike's classes or whatever the fuck, or even American Red Cross classes, find a stop the bleed class somewhere. That's the most important thing you could do. Is you can learn how to apply a tourniquet in fucking 3 minutes. That's the easiest thing in the world. But learning how to pack like open cavity wounds and things like that, you can, just by stuffing some Kerlex in some dude's gut, you can save his life. Like no shit. Just by knowing how to do a 3-sided tape on a sucking chest wound, you can save somebody's life. And it's super simple. It's not very difficult to do this stuff. But I would, if I had to guess, I would say 98% of the public doesn't know how to do any of this, or they don't have the temerity to do it, which is even worse. I was talking on Andy Frisella's show about this this past weekend. Like everybody wants to fucking go to the range and shoot and shit like that. The chances of you getting in a gunfight to defend somebody else are pretty low. The chances of you, which is not to say you shouldn't be prepared for that, but the chances of you running into somebody who's just been in a car wreck, who's bleeding out, and you can save their life are way higher than any gunfight that you might get into on the street. So I think it's to what you said earlier about being a value add or a net negative. That's for the person who's just sitting in a cubicle right now. That's super important. You really need to be thinking about that. We no longer have any natural predators. You know what I mean? We've become our own natural predator. Our laziness and comfort, we've become like diabetes and heart disease kill more people than anything now. To me, the only reasonable solution to that is to be disciplined and create your own predator. You know, everyone we know that we consider to be great at what they did, like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, people like that, they would create challenges for themselves internally in their own mind that nobody else even knew about, right? Like, oh, this guy looked at me wrong, so fuck him. I'm going to go out and score 50 points tonight. They put that at their back, right? They got that lion at their back now chasing them. So they're going to get to that makes sure that you give max effort. You could do that in your life. You can challenge yourself, and it's not about keeping up with the Joneses or any of that horse shit. It's about being the best possible person you could be. James Altucher talks about this. If you improve 1% a day, you know, over 30 days, you've improved 100% or something like that. I can't remember what the exact numbers were. That's for the regular person. For all these people out in the space, people that are like, they talk about what the problem is, and that's how they make their money, is by, in my opinion, they're just adding to the net negativity. We have to make it cool to be like a fucking dad, to be around for your kids, teach your kids shit. We need to make it cool to be self-sufficient. We need to make it cool again to help other people, because as much as I don't want to admit it, we're in a faddish culture. People fucking follow the trends, man. Like imagine if this whole support the current thing, whatever it happens to be, imagine if we shifted that into something that actually helped other people. You know what I mean? Now we're talking about a country and not just a loosely associated group of 330 million people.
Yeah, we need to spend more time invested in building up. I mean, social media has amazing aspects, but it also has, obviously, I mean, the social media platforms are really winning when it comes to profits and influencing masses, because they got the psychologist kind of tweaking the emotion that's driven by the algorithm, which makes more ad revenue and drives these young men, especially, into these directions where it's a bottomless pit. I mean, I look at it in my own industry. Me, Tim Kennedy, he started Sheepdog Response around the same time I started Fieldcraft Survival, and people try to people not knowing that me and Tim are friends
Mm.
try to put us together and make us fight and infight. I have tactical instructors talking shit about me. I have people sending me DMs saying this shit's being talked. And I've realized that there's a whole bunch of people that, whether they're special operations guys or just really influential people who could have positive impact on culture, are too focused in, down and in, instead of up and out. And if they focused on up and out instead, where they looked at us as collaborators or assets or partners or friends, or hell, put the blinders on and continue to move forward, then they would be affecting culture in a positive way. And that's what we need. I mean, I hate to be like the woo-woo guy who's like, we need to be super positive and collaborate and work with each other. But the alternative is we have tribes on the same side fighting each other. Yeah. We have our own civil conflict. And I think a lot of what's happening in culture, like you said, about making it popular to be a dad, I've never posted about my kids, but now I realized in a very impactful way that the young men who follow me and I influence need to know that it's cool to be a dad, that it's cool to be prepared to be a dad, to be a good spouse, to be a good father, and to be just a good dude without being a dickhead. And I think more of that is necessary in order for us to kind of progress as a society, or we just won't make it. I mean, we'll just purge, we'll fight, and then the only people winning are the superpowers around us, China, Russia, and everybody else who's looking at us like we don't need to go to war with them. We just need to drop the seeds of doubt and let them fight each other, because they'll just kill each other.
Yeah, for sure. And it's nowhere, I think, is it more important than with young men. I mean, we see it in inner cities and we see it in the suburbs with mass shooters. It's fatherless homes. Even if there's a man in the home, it's increased in some ways by poverty, but it's a nihilism. It's a young man that has this just aching desire for some kind of purpose in life, right? Like 250,000 years of evolution have taught them to their genetic core that they need to be out there being aggressive, protecting people, using their natural aggression for good. Like, it's not good or bad. It's how you utilize this stuff. And instead of doing that, we've taught young men, one, we took their fathers away, right? Two, we fucking taught them that their aggression is intrinsically bad, which is an asinine thing to fucking teach somebody, right? I mean, that would be like teaching women that empathy is somehow toxic. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, we would never say that, right? Because it's an ignorant thing to say, but for some reason, we'll say that about men. Instead of teaching these young men that it's good to be strong, because that strength is necessary, and when used appropriately, you can save people's lives, you can improve people's lives. You know what I mean? That's the entire point of masculinity, of aggression, of testosterone, is to provide and protect, right? These young men,
100%.
Yeah, these young men, they're our best weapon against evil. They are our best weapon against evil, and frankly, the lack of that controlled aggression is where most evil comes from. It's weak men, right, that try to fucking, because of their insecurity mixed with this natural aggression that they have, they feel like they need to, lash out all the time. When you go watch a nature documentary, a lion is either lying down, doing nothing, or chasing prey. They're not fucking walking around telling everybody how fucking tough they are. You know what I mean? Like, that's unnecessary. It's completely, everybody knows who the lion is. And you may feel like, if you can hear me talking right now, you may feel like you're not that guy. I'm not that lion. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. You just have to be it. Like, you just genetically, that is exactly who you are as a human being. That's how you've been programmed. Your DNA has been programmed for hundreds of thousands of years. So you have to ignore all this bullshit. You have to ignore everybody telling you that your aggression is wrong. You have to ignore everybody telling you that masculinity is toxic. You have to ignore everybody trying to bait you into these stupid ideas. Because, the only thing that's going to protect us from all of this shit that's going on, all these institutions that have now turned inward and are battling the population for some reason, is you. Like, you and I are going to be involved in this fight, but in just a few years, it's going to be people who are like 13, 14, 15 right now. And if we're telling them that their aggression and masculinity is evil, then they're not going to be here. They're not going to be here to fight back.
Yeah, it's the warrior class, right? We've always had throughout time a class of people willing to step up and fight. And the fact that, we have an entire culture, woke propaganda that's telling these young men that any masculinity is toxic and not necessary is just setting up our country and humanity up for not surviving and not thriving, certainly. And so I love, I love jujitsu. I love MMA. I love all of these outlets for men to step into an arena and be confronted, to be figuratively and literally punched in the face, because that builds resilience. One thing we need to retain in this country is our ability to be resilient, because that will mean the difference, especially in conflict, of coming out on top or coming out on bottom. And a lot of countries, including China and Russia, know this because foundationally they live hard lives. Like when we institute tough language and we say we're going to sanction them to the max, well, what are we talking about? Taking away the yachts from a guy who grew up in the trenches and alleys of Russia, who is naturally oppressed foundationally as a society. Like, these are the hardest people on the planet, and you're talking about sanctioning them. They're already sanctioned. They're born into sanction. So we need to build and retain that fabric of our society, because right now, all the trends that we're seeing, especially all the virtue signaling from young men who just keep talking and running their mouths, but don't step up to serve their community, their local government, the federal government, to stand up in leadership positions, to serve in the military, to serve in uniform for their communities, just means we're going to be less resilient as it goes on and on and on to the future, where eventually something's going to break. And I think that breaking point, honestly, is going to be the next election cycle as we lead up to it.
It could be. There's a lot of stupid shit going on right now. And it's, one of the reasons I like the oath of office and oath of enlistment, they're all pretty much the same. The reason I like it is because that it bifurcates between internal and external threats, right? Like, it's very obvious to people that we should, as a community, stave off any sort of external threat. I don't think anybody would ever have any qualms with that. It's the internal threat that people seem to have. There was a time when people had different ideas about how to control it and how to fight back against it, and now it seems like there's pretty disparate ideas on whether or not it even exists. You know what I mean? Or I guess who is the threat. So the FBI and the Attorney General continue to say that it's like white supremacists in America that are a huge threat. That's absolute nonsense. It's like there's literally no statistical data to support that statement, not one. Meanwhile, Antifa caused $2 billion worth of damage in 3 months, you know what I mean, in the summer of 2020. So I think we're both meant to, so the internal threat from my perspective is, it's only allowed, it's like a bucket with a hole in it, right? Or a fence with a hole in it or something like that. Like, evil preys on weakness, and it can only punch through those lines when there's a fucking gap. And the gap in this scenario is our complacency, our lack of intellect, preparedness, intestinal fortitude, which is, that sounds pretty rough. But the good news is that those are all things that we can control. You know what I mean? Like, we immediately, starting today, you can improve each one of those situations from your perspective. And as you do that, the people around you will start to do the same, because when someone does good, like, this is a good thought experiment, or actually a good practical experiment. If you're in a group of people and something's a mess, start cleaning it up. Don't say a word, to see what happens. And watch as those other people start helping you clean it up. It's a natural human inclination to be part of that, right? But somebody's got to be a fucking leader at some point. And it's not going to be somebody with the position leader. It's going to be you. Like everybody that can hear the sound of my voice, you're a leader. And if you don't engage like that in solving problems, then not only are you, failing yourself, you're failing everybody around you. And then you're failing everybody that those people could have impacted downstream as well.
Yeah. The military version of that, the definition of that is informal leadership, right? In the military, you have designated leadership positions because you're dutied and titled as such. But the most impactful leadership is informal leadership that's not put in a position. It's the peer-to-peer relationship. It's people taking it upon themselves to be, know, and do. Like, you want to be a good leader, it doesn't require you to be put in a pedestal, on a pulpit, or even in a duty and responsibility. It's about what you do every single day. That's why the family unit's so critical. It's like, yeah, a relationship between a man and a woman, and being a man and taking that duty and responsibility as natural as it is, and accepting that, being the leader of your home, being a father figure, which is being a leader for your children. We're so scared and intimidated as a society and culture to stand up and say, I'm going to tell my child what they're going to do. I'm going to give them guidance. I mean, I have twin 3-year-olds, a boy and a girl. I go to my son and I say, hey, son, this is what you're going to do. You're not going to fall on your ass, and you're not going to have a temper tantrum at 3. And when I snap my fingers and I raise the tone of my voice, he immediately gets up and he goes, Roger that. And I say, you say, yes, sir. That's what's coming out of your mouth right now. Yes, sir. And he goes, yes, sir. And that construction, developing that structure for him, is allowing him to thrive and succeed. But we think breaking those walls down because we want to be empathetic to all their desires as children is going to somehow benefit us. I think what we're missing because of the lack of the family unit is structure, discipline, all these things that lead to us to actually thrive. And when you're a leader in your own skin, you don't have to be able to lead anybody. Start with leading yourself. Start with waking up every single day with purpose, with structure, looking yourself in the mirror, and then not confirming a bias that's negative where you say, I suck, because you will definitely make that your belief, because you'll look for nothing but the evidence of that. Say to yourself, you're the best. And then create the behaviors and the routines that are going to facilitate that. And then one day you'll wake up and you'll actually feel like you're best. And that takes a lot of introspect, but it also just takes for you to suck it up and just be a man, be a woman, be willing to be comfortable in your own skin. And that's so important, man. It's so important in society. It's so important in how we create, I think, in which seems weird, but an abstract culture going against all this woke propaganda that we're hearing, that our youth are hearing.
Yeah, well, one of our problems is that we like to try to solve problems downstream instead of upstream, right? So there's gun violence, and we're like, well, we'll just get rid of the guns. Okay, you're a little late. Like, you're way late to the party. That's like, that's not even a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. That's like waiting for somebody to die and trying to revive them, basically, at that point, right? All of these solutions start at the foundation, just like anything else. If you were a baseball player and your swing is fucked up, you don't go onto the field and take batting practice and try to hit home runs to fix your swing. You know what I mean? You go back into the cage, you break your swing down into smaller elements, you get back to the fundamentals. And when I was growing up, my dad was not a nice man. He was very abusive, but the one thing that he did that I thought was really smart was yes, sir, and no, ma'am. I think that builds a level of structure for a young person, right? It's like a bolo almost. You're being on the lookout for opportunities to do things to build structure for your kids. That's one of them. Like, if you're talking about breaking down your day, get up in the morning and, have a plan for the day, right? Because if you're going nowhere, that's exactly where you're going to get. You're going to get fucking nowhere. Have a plan for the day. Well, yes, sir, and no, ma'am shows respect. It's not about, like, I do this to this day. I'm 41 years old. And if I meet somebody, if it's a human being that I don't know, even if they're younger than me, it's yes, sir, and no, ma'am, until I know them personally. You know what I mean? I don't, it's just like ingrained in my brain. But you know, that kind of structure from a young age is just like setting fitness or dietary goals for yourself now as an adult. You know what I mean? It's a roadmap. They're guardrails. Like, I'm definitely going to do this, or training yourself to fight back against the bystander effect. It's a psychological principle where the more people are watching some kind of event, the less likely any of them are to get involved and do something. That's literally a leadership vacuum. That's what it is. And all it takes is for one person to step up and be a leader, and then everybody will get involved. You got to be that person, right? Now, as an adult, it's a little bit harder. You got to retrain yourself sometime. But this, to me, focuses back on the younger generation. And it's one of the principles that I really like that we don't really talk about too much is I will ensure justice come to those who deserve it, whether it be punishment or reward. It reminds me of this author, James Dobson, from Focus on the Family. You probably heard of him back in the day. You're about my age. Wrote a parenting book, and he said in the book that the more often you catch your kids doing the right thing, the less often you'll catch them doing the wrong thing, which means positive reinforcement for children can really work. But it is still the carrot and the stick, right? Like the stick, you need that discipline. You have to have it. And what other part of life can you just kind of wing it and everything's going to be okay without any kind of guardrails or anything like that? Imagine there's no lines on the street, right? What happens? I mean, you've probably driven in India before. It's chaos, complete and utter chaos, and there's not a clean or undented car in the area. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like being proactive in an inactive society. It's like, if you want to be proactive, start with being involved and conscious in your children's lives and your spouse's life. I mean, one of the problems with technology and the integration of technology, supposedly to optimize life, is that we are now spending our time and attention, our consciousness, focused on that thing instead of focused on the people in front of us. So when our son is doing something, or my daughter's doing something, and I'm not attentive to that, they're just winging it because they're trying to figure shit out. And most people, like you said, are winging it. They're trying to figure shit out, but they don't have the people in their lives to tell them, hey, dude, this isn't right. And what I found mystifying, and you've experienced this, Tim Kennedy, myself, Dutch, all these guys who are influencing through their voice, through their reason, through their experience. We are influencing culture and society where you have young men. I get more young men sliding in my DMs going, hey, Mike, I'm thinking about joining the military. So what do you think I should do? I go, grab your balls and join the military. If that's what you want and you're going to regret it, go do it. The following day, they text me or they DM me and they say, Mike, I joined the military. And I'm like, well, that was easy, because they needed somebody in their life to just tell them, hey, dude, it's okay to suck. It's okay to take leaps of faith. It's okay to bound forward. It's okay to have structure. And what I think is missing, and it's the component that's missing across the board, is clear, concise communication without the concern of the woke, without the concern of being offensive, without concern, and just leading the right path, which is the way we were raised. I mean, some dude sent me a post, and I didn't think about this until I read this in its totality. It's kind of like a funny meme. I put it on my Instagram, mike.a.glover. But it was like, for the Gen X, if you're around 42 years old, you grew up and you were self-reliant as a child, because that was the life that we lived when we grew up, because our moms and dads were working, and we didn't grow around technology. We in the morning on a summer day, we were launched out into the world, and we didn't come home until the street lights would come.
Like we had,
Dude, it's like,
people of our age, like we had maybe like an old Nintendo or Sega or some shit. But if you got caught indoors middle of the day playing that shit, like your mom's like, get your ass out of here. What are you doing?
It's funny, it's that we survived off of other people's garden hoses. That was like our water. It's like that, but that built, I think, generationally, and astoundingly, a sense of resilience that, if you take it one generation back, is missing. Is missing. And I think we're the last hope for influencing that culture and instilling those fundamentals that we learned at such a young age into society before we're off and gone. Because after we're off and gone, welcome to a new world. Welcome to an entire different society that forgot where it came from.
Yeah, we're at the precipice right now. And this dovetails nicely into another one of the principles. I'll put more into this country than I'll take out of it. We've all heard this, generally speaking, whether it was in the Boy Scouts or the military, like leave things better than you found it. It doesn't say leave things as you found it, by the way. It says leave things better than you found it, because it's the understanding, one, that there's a natural degradation, and two, that it's all of our responsibility to ensure that all of this is maintained, right? Not it's not your job or my job. It's not like, oh, somebody gets paid to come pick that up. Pick that shit up, dude. It's what are we really telling people when we say this? It's not just about cleaning up your brass at a gun range or a campsite or anything like that. It's not even necessarily about conservation of the environment. It's about the kind of mindset that is constantly on the lookout for opportunities to improve their position and the positions of those around them, right? Whether it's, cleaning shit up or building infrastructure for something or sharing the information, the knowledge that you have with the next generation or other people in your generation so more people can succeed. It's that drive and innovation that keeps society progressing. And you combine that, right, with the right kind of empathy that holds people accountable. And now you're talking about one of the most important factors in our society. It recognizes a few things. First, that we all have the responsibility to be good stewards of our environment, of our country, of our relationships, both our personal relationships, our relationship generally with society, with our spouses, with our children, whatever. And it also acknowledges that things break down, right? Thermodynamics, things are breaking down over time, and they require time and maintenance. Everything does. And if we really want to live in the best country in the world, if you want to wave that fucking flag around, you damn sure better be putting the work in to make sure it's the best goddamn country in the world. You know what I mean? I don't want to hear people saying that shit unless, if somebody says America's the best country in the world, I'm like, all right, cool. What'd you do to help? You know what I mean? Because you can't rest on that platitude, because it's our friends that died to make that shit happen. So tell me what you're doing to make this the best country in the world. This principle can be applied literally anywhere, whether it's your marriage, your fucking friendships, your relationship with the country, and all this stuff. And the other part of that is that the idea of hard work for its own sake, I think, has completely vanished. I tell people that all you can really control is your attitude and your effort. You can't control the outcome of things. And we've taught people to have that's what equity is. It's the expectation of a positive outcome or an equal outcome for everybody, but that's not how life works. We've taught people to have an expectation of a positive outcome, but that's unrealistic. You keep working until you succeed. You don't just expect success. If you do, then you will fucking fail, man. There's no way to do that. And I think that's where we see people. We talked about resilience earlier. They charge really hard right up until the first thing they have to negotiate, the first roadblock they have to negotiate. And then they either bounce off it or whatever, and then that's it for them. It was too hard. Can't do that. It wasn't too hard. You were too soft. You know what I mean? It's another thing I like to tell people. The weight does not get lighter. You get stronger, right? And it's incumbent upon you to do that because we need that strength. So I encourage people routinely to seek out discomfort, whether it's your personal fitness or having difficult conversations with people, or, taking time out of your day to go find people like Mike Glover and Tim Kennedy and do some jiu-jitsu, learn how to shoot a little bit, learn how to fucking pack a wound, learn how to find food out there. You know what I mean? These are really important things that we're not really doing. I mean, some people do them as a hobby now, but what other life-sustaining activity do we just kind of relegate to hobby status, right? If you had to learn how to breathe, that wouldn't be something you do a couple of times on the weekend in the summer, but for fun. You would be doing that shit all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we live in a society of expecting instant gratification. I mean, again, a lot of societal habits now are built off of the optimization of the technological world we live in. We want everything and we want it now. You want food, you could just Uber it. You know, you want a ride, you could just Uber it. You know, you want something to arrive at your door the same day or the next day, you just Amazon it. So it's like this expectation in life. I've seen it in the business realm. I've seen it in professional development realms where people want success, but they're not willing to do the hard work. I mean, I have a lot of companies that were parallel to us when we started our business, but they weren't willing to commit to the long game. You know, it's like Shackleton, through endurance we conquer. It's like the game is always the long game. There is no instant pathway to success because that's the pyramid scheme and it's a scam. It doesn't work. So when it comes to like individual behavior, I think the execution of behaviors is how we kind of get back to ethics and character and building those attributes in people. You know, like if I walk by trash, I pick it up. Why? Because not because I'm anti-litter or I'm like thinking about the the world and all the environmental disasters that take place. I'm doing it because it's my community. If I step over a piece of trash, I want to pick up that trash, put it in a trash bin because I want to beautify and maintain the integrity of our local community. And I think if a lot of people get outside into the real world, and if they had a worldly perspective, most people don't have a worldly perspective. They talk about world issues, but they've never been outside of their state or their town. When you get a worldly perspective, you start to realize, man, everything we have is amazing. And if we really want to sustain the path we're on, then we need to protect it. We need to do the maintenance, like you said. We need to do the sustaining of that because, it's, I always quote this song by this country singer. It's called Hold On. And it's like, the idea is like, I hold on to what works for me. Just because you have a pretty car or a pretty thing doesn't mean it's better, because the things you have, including democracy and freedom, this liberty and great life we live in America, if you're not willing to treat it with respect, if you're not willing to do something for it and nurture it, then you're going to lose it. Eventually you will lose it. And I think we need to get into a better mindset of that. And it starts again with the family unit and teaching peer-to-peer. Hey, open that door for that woman. Hey, that dude just fell on the ground. Help him up. Hey, that dude's got a flat. Don't just burn past him knowing that you know how to fix the problem. Be fixers in your own community. And this gets back to the roots of who we are at our heart. We're tribe. We're tribe. We love to establish groups. We love to organize in small numbers, but you could do that amongst your friends, in your own backyard, in your own town, in your own city. It's one of the reasons we started this concept of American contingency, where it's like we want people to depend on each other and not depend on an institution that's not going to come to save your ass. The more we can get back to that, the more we can get off our phones and integrate in real life experiences with real life people and conversations, the better off I think we'll be.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're around people enough, you develop a rapport. It's interesting. Even if you don't really agree on things, there is a saying, it's hard to hate up close. You know what I mean? Because it's not because it's difficult to dislike somebody you're around a lot, but because it's impractical. You know what I mean? Just the stress of life will make you start, like, you've been on teams, I'm sure, with dudes that you didn't necessarily care for, but in a gunfight, you don't even worry about that guy. Like, I know he's got that quarter. That's not even part of it. That's a whole separate thing. And it kind of reminds me of this concept from buds. A lot of my buddies that were SEALs have told me about, and it's the log and the fucking wake. You know what I mean? Lying down, doing sit-ups, or doing pushing the log overhead. I've got the weight is a phrase that's often said. Somebody asks if somebody else is a good man. No one asks how much money that dude makes. Nobody asks how hot his girlfriend is, how nice his fucking car is. They will typically ask a very simple question, or maybe they don't phrase it this way, and maybe it's not in the form of a question, but it'll be like, if you needed help, is that dude going to be there to help you? That's what a good man is, right? The most important thing you can ever be in your life is there for someone who needs you, right? I've got the weight means two things. It means, one, that you can trust your teammates to help you. When you're not strong enough, when you're having muscle failure, or when you're struggling, your teammates are there to carry the weight when you can't. But it also means that you're pushing yourself, not just there, but in preparation to make sure you can carry the weight when your teammate needs help, right? This is what we mean when we say value add. Can you carry the weight? Can you carry the responsibility of being a human being in American society in the 21st century? Are you able to, as you said, kind of box out these institutions, keep them from coming in and getting involved and taking over our shit, and solve problems at the local level? Because if you're not willing to do that, then you are going to be a subject. You're going to be ruled. And typically speaking, you're going to be ruled by lesser men.
Yeah, it's a painful reality that if we don't shift course, I think that we're going to be facing really soon. And I think profoundly, even the conversations that we're having right now on a small scale for a smaller audience compared to the totality of society is needed, because those people who go into their own social networks, this positive feedback loop, the tactics that we're talking about, once implemented, it's what people actually want to do. But they, and I think when we start building this, even small influencers who don't have a big following, it's like, man, just the impact you make in your own household is important. And you don't have to have a social media following. You don't have to have a handle. You don't have to have authored a book in order to be impactful. It starts with you, and it starts with your household.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is, and this will ring true for anybody that knows anything about the special forces community. What you're essentially doing is creating force multipliers, right? You're sending people out into the world. We reduce it to calling it train the trainer, but what you're really doing is, it's almost like a multi-level marketing, but it's in the other direction. Instead of siphoning off everybody's money, what you're doing is siphoning down strength and resilience. You know what I mean? You're putting people through some stress to teach them that they can handle it, and you're going to send them out in the world and teach them, or have them teach other people that they can handle stress. People can tell when you are a help. What I consider a helper, somebody who is ready, prepared, and willing to do the things that people need to do when they're in trouble. They can tell you're strong, even when you don't necessarily feel strong. If you have like maybe today's not your best day, or maybe you have imposter syndrome. I don't know why they would trust me with this. Fuck all that. They can tell by how you act, by the confidence you project, by the fact that you make yourself available to them. And the same is true for strong people who don't necessarily know what to do, who feel the same helplessness and hopelessness that you do sometimes. When you make a conscious decision to help other people, not only have you helped them specifically, but you've also motivated somebody who didn't know how to help and get involved. It's the bystander effect that we talked about earlier. There's this weird psychological impediment. I don't know if it's like group shame or embarrassment or what it is, but you can tell it even at the individual level. You mentioned before somebody falling down. People will avert their gaze. They'll look in the other way when somebody falls down because they don't want the person to be embarrassed, or they feel embarrassed on their behalf. What the fuck are you doing? Go pick that motherfucker up, man. Like, are we really going to let some weird tinge of shame or embarrassment stop us from helping other people? Like, what kind of person or what kind of people are we if we allow that to happen? That's like the very basic stuff. So talk about picking up trash and stuff like this. These little opportunities at the micro level, where it's holding a door or doing something nice for somebody or helping somebody on the side of the road or whatever it is, you start doing that stuff and watch your life improve and watch the community around you improve. That's how that works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it could be a new defined purpose, man. I mean, a lot of people who are looking for this concept of hey, I need something to wake up to. I need a driver. I need a factor. I need a purpose in my life. Being selfless is a great tactic in feeling accomplished every single day by helping others. I mean, it's one of the things that drives me every single day. If I'm educating people on to be better prepared, man, that brings me profound purpose. The same purpose that I had training Afghans or Libyans or name X country in fighting and defending their own country. So I think when we look at these specific attributes, I think of this example that we talk about at Fieldcraft on 9/11, where you had a groupthink mentality in the World Trade Center, where a lot of people who were told to hunker down were told hunker down in place and don't move. And those places, which were the organizations on each floor that did that, paid the ultimate sacrifice. They perished in the towers collapsing. There's one specific instance of Goldman Sachs, a security executive who actually was a Silver Star recipient in Vietnam. He worked head of security, and he said, "We're not doing that." And he said, "I'm going to evacuate all of you." And they had rehearsed because he was focused on preparedness and focused on this understanding that this could happen because he was in the first bombing of the World Trade Center that happened in the parking garage. And so he knew it could happen one day. So he evacuated personally over 2,000 employees, saved 2,000 lives that day that would have perished. And his security teammates, and a few employees that were head executives who said they would not leave until everybody was evacuated, they ended up perishing. And it's like, it just takes you to get off your ass and do something about it, to lead the way. And like I said, you're not leading the way to virtue signal on social media. You're doing it. Lead the way in your own way by leading yourself or leading your family. That's a good start in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. And on that note, it reminds me of an old General Patton quote. He said, "A good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week." It's get off your fucking ass. You know what I mean? We all know what the problems are here in the U.S. A lot of it seems daunting. Some seem insurmountable, and it's understandable that you might feel that way to some degree. But that's not where the conversation ends. You've advanced until you met resistance, and now it's time to do battle drill and alpha on this bitch. You know what I mean? It's time to flank these motherfuckers. So you have to be part of the solution to this problem, starting from the ground up. We are a government of, for, and by the people, and if the people are lazy and tuned out, if the people are shitty, then the government's going to be shitty. So that said, knowing what the problems are, before we get out of here, what's your advice for people who want to help, who want to make things better, who just don't know right now what to do?
Yeah, the benefit of our country is the decentralization of governance in our lives. I mean, it's the benefit of the United States of America. A lot of people get wrapped around this idea that the federal government dictates their lives. It's actually not true. If they put down their cell phones and all the problems go away, then you have the answer. It's your cell phone. It's all the information you're being fed. We don't want to be ignorant to a corrupt government. But what we want to do is affect change in which we can control. So you can get out there and you can virtue signal and tell everybody how disgusted you are, or you can start to get involved in all the things that you've outsourced. A lot of parents complain, but they don't want to get involved in parent-teacher conferences. They don't want to get involved in communicating to their superintendents, even knowing the personalities in the task organizations that control all of these things. Go to your local board meets. Go to your local your superintendent meets. Go and talk to your mayor, talk to your sheriff. And if you have the leadership potential, you think you have the right character, the right position, get involved in local legislation, because then you're going to actually make change in your life that you're going to feel. And what I told to a lot of people, like a lot of people, because they've made this in their virtue, their persona, if you want to affect actual tangible change, you have to be willing to get out there and expose yourself. You have to be willing to get out there and expose your opinion on a big scale. That big scale is serving Congress, Senate, doing something of service and getting out there and fighting the fight. If you're not that kind of guy, like I'm not that kind of guy, I will get behind the people that are those kind of guys. Joe Kent,
Mm-hmm.
a former special operations guy, former Ranger, former special operations guy, whose wife was killed in the fight against ISIS,
Yeah,
is running.
his wife, by the way, is responsible for more dead terrorists than probably any human being in the United States. Like literally,
Yeah,
I'm
and,
not.
and there's still
That's not
people who
hyperbole.
criticize that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
people still criticize that.
oh
And
boy.
so when we look at like the position for me, for you, for the Tim Kennedys of the world, we're getting behind activating and communicating about these good people who need to be influenced in their own community and turning the tides of democracy. Because we forget, like people who want to go to war with the government, 50% of that government is represented likely by the party that you affiliate with.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we going to do?
Yeah,
Well, get out there and
people ask
change
about that. Like people keep
Yeah.
talking about civil war. Civil war between whom and over what? Like, because this is not the clearly drawn Mason-Dixon line that people remember from the. This is not even close. The civil war that's happening right now isn't going to be fought with fucking cannons and guns. It's going to be fought with your will and effort. That's what is going to be fought with, 100%. If you really want things to be better, man, God damn it, you've got. Here's one of the things before we get out of here, I really want to talk about this for just. Or I want to mention this. You have got to spend more time supporting the shit you believe in and less time talking shit about the shit you don't believe in. You have to. Otherwise, you're just adding negative shit. Like what is exactly what you're talking about. If you want things to be better, stop fucking bitching on Twitter and go find some people or some ideas that you support and actually get involved and make some positive change. Otherwise, we're all just going to bitch our way into an early grave.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love the concept because it's so simple to activate. It's a simple behavioral change that shifts your mindset, and then you wake up and you're concerned about being proactive again in society instead of being reactive to everything and creating an echo chamber of falling in love with your own voice. Like, shut the fuck up, get to work, and do something about it.
100%. Well, I really appreciate you coming today. Anything else you want to share with the audience before we get out of here?
No, I just appreciate what you're doing on the Citizen Podcast and what you're doing with a group of married men that are doing the right thing. The Tim Kennedys, the Dutch Moores, the world, all these guys that I highly respect. It's what we need more of, and these conversations are how we flesh these things out, which I appreciate. And I just thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, 100%, man. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Fieldcraftsurvival.com, AmericanContingency.com. You can Google my name to find all my personal stuff. I'm out there in the social media realm, but Fieldcraft Survival was the company. A lot of free education on podcasts, on YouTube channels, all that stuff. The idea is like, hey, come see what this idea of preparedness is about, and then go visit Sheepdog Response and all these great people who are doing similar things.
Yeah.
We're not the end-all be-all solution, by the way. There's a lot of people in the same industry and space that are super positive that you can learn from. Do that, and that will be the right step in the right direction.
Yeah, and if you haven't gone to one of these events, by the way, before for any of these organizations, I assure you it isn't what you think it is. It isn't a bunch of like 25 to 35-year-old white dudes with beards. It's a lot of women, people of all races, people that aren't conservative. They just want to know how to fucking protect themselves and make their communities better. That's it.
100%.
So thanks for coming today, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate you.
And appreciate you guys watching. This has been Citizen.